Good afternoon, Mr. Jesse here with the Burton Public Library, bringing you the fourth of four book chats that I'm doing this summer. I hope you have been able to see or enjoy some of my other ones, and if not, let this be a nice introduction to what I've been doing through the summer. So, I have chosen what I found to be a really interesting graphic novel. It's in our YA section, YA graphic novel section here at the Burton Public Library. We own a copy of it. It came out 2 years ago. It was written by a celebrity who was most well known in the television world for his work on Star Trek, and that is George Takei. Rhymes with OK. So the graphic novel is called They Called Us Enemy. So George Takei was born in California. He was 4 years old when his family was taken from their home and put in a Japanese American internment camp. And these camps were created after Pearl Harbor. And if you don't know what Pearl Harbor is, it was when portions of the land of Hawaii were attacked by the Japanese Air Force, a surprise attack, December 7th, 1941. Nice. December 7th, 1941 was the day that attack happened, and it was really devastating. As President Roosevelt said, it is a day that will live in infamy, which means it'll be remembered for all the wrong reasons. So Pearl Harbor happens. President Roosevelt appeals to Congress. The United States declares war on Japan, the Empire of Japan. George and his family are in the unenviable position of being Japanese Americans. So George is the oldest of three. Him, his younger brother, and his younger sister were all born here in the United States. His mother was born here in the United States. His father had immigrated from Japan, and I forget when that was, but his father had been here a long time, and they ran a dry cleaning business, among other things, and lived in a nice neighborhood in Los Angeles. But yeah, when war is declared on Japan, there's all this worry as to what is going to happen to the Japanese Americans who are living here, some of whom are citizens, some of whom are not. George's father had lived here a real long time and would have applied for citizenship, but he was not allowed to. And since then, the laws have been sped up a little bit. But yeah, back then he was not allowed to apply for citizenship because he was born in Japan. So yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty for Japanese Americans, and they faced a lot of discrimination, a lot of hate, a lot of people, citizens of the United States, who did not trust them because they were of Japanese ancestry. And it's really tough, right? I mean, you don't choose who you are born to. And if you immigrate here to this country and are a good citizen, then you should be given rights that everyone else is afforded. It kind of goes back to some of the lessons and some of the really difficult circumstances that were present during the March trilogy that a lot of African Americans faced in the South and all over the country for decades and decades and decades. So there were public leaders in Los Angeles and in California. Earl Warren, who was the Attorney General, and Fletcher Bowron was the mayor of Los Angeles, and they kind of stoked some of this anti-Japanese sentiment. And it kind of went on record and said, we can't trust these people, labeling an entire group and just saying they can't be trusted. We don't know what's going to happen, and we can't risk another Pearl Harbor. And on some level, it's understandable. You know, a lot. We were the United States was attacked, and hundreds, maybe I think thousands of people were killed during Pearl Harbor. I don't have those figures in my head, so I apologize for that. But and nobody wants that. So war creates all these very difficult situations, but it's really tough when you say all Japanese Americans cannot be trusted, and we need to do something with them. And the result of all of that fear and all of that labeling all these people as bad and cannot be trusted, President Roosevelt signs Executive Order 9066, creating the legal framework for the internment camps. And the internment camps, there were quite a few around the country. A lot were in the West. There was one in Arkansas. But they held, over the course of World War II, 120,000 Japanese Americans. So that's how many people were held in these camps during the years of World War II. Started in 1942, the internment camps. George, like I said, he was 4 when this happened. His parents, his brother and his sister were all taken by soldiers. The soldiers showed up at their house, at their home, and said, pack 1 suitcase, you're leaving now. You know, they couldn't access their bank accounts. They couldn't take treasured heirlooms. They had to leave most of their possessions and really just say goodbye to their houses that they had no idea what would happen to while they were gone. So put on a train and taken to, their first stop was still in California at the Santa Anita racetrack, where they lived in a horse stall. So they lived in a horse stall along with many other Japanese American families who were also in the same situation. And they lived here for a little while until they were put on a train bound for Arkansas, and traveled, halfway across the country to live in a completely different place. They got to this next camp, Camp Rowan. George was 5 by then. Camp Rower, Rohwer, in Arkansas. And, it's a long train ride. George kind of thinks it's an adventure. They're sort of on vacation. He doesn't realize that vacations with armed guards on the train with you is not a normal thing. And when you pull into a train station, you're forced to draw all the shades so people can't see in and see what's going on. George's parents do their best to keep the family together and keep everyone calm, even though internally I have no idea what they would think or how they would keep it together. Because if you're just taken from your home, whole family, we're taking you here, we're going to put you in these structures that aren't the best. They're really hot. Sometimes they can be really smelly. Forced to live in very close contact to lots of other families. And around the whole camp is barbed wire. So you cannot just leave when you want and go to the store. You must live your life inside this barbed wire with armed guards kind of everywhere. So, and if you step out of line, you're going to have to face them. So in no way is it the same or as bad as the concentration camps that happened during World War II, because they were systematically murdering so many people. And then again, based on mostly because if you were Jewish, that's what was happening to you in Europe, Germany mostly, and Poland and the surrounding countries. But still, not the concentration camps, not the horrors of there, but their own horror of just having everything taken from you and being forced into this place because we don't trust you. And it's all, and war just creates these situations where everyone is tense and you're making decisions you think for the best of your country, but what you're doing to all these people is really a very, very difficult thing. So George and his brother explore throughout the camp, and they have a pretty good time. They go searching for dinosaur bones. They're in a whole new place. They've never been to Arkansas before, so it's different and it's new. And they try finding insects, and they get into some trouble. And then in February 1943, lots of the war is going pretty badly, and many people are dying, including lots of American soldiers. There were a lot of Japanese Americans who, when the United States entered World War II, lots of Japanese Americans went to enlist and become part of the U.S. military and fight the war. But they were actually turned away. They were turned away because the anti-Japanese sentiment was high and people felt like we couldn't trust them. So to give them guns and put them in the army was taking too big of a risk for a lot of Americans. But in 1943, the war had been going on for quite a while. Lots and lots of people were dying. President Roosevelt decides that Japanese Americans are able to serve if they can prove their loyalty. And so this resulted in filling out a loyalty questionnaire. And this basically said that Japanese Americans aren't real Americans and they must give up their loyalty to Japan before they can serve. And then if you answered yes to these questions, you can join the military. But if you answered no, all Japanese Americans were forced to take this loyalty test. And if you answered no to any of the questions, then some would go to jail, some would be transferred to Camp Tula Lake back in California, in the northern part this time, which was the highest security internment camp. And that's what happened to the Takeis. So the problem after they leave Arkansas and go to Camp Tula Lake, some of the Japanese Americans in the internment camp radicalize. They kind of form groups and say, this has gone on too far. We essentially are in prison because we're not allowed to go outside of these barbed wire gates and armed guards are being posted. So we're not going to take this anymore, and we want something to change, which is completely their right, because it's been over a year or two at this point that they've been in these camps, and all of their freedoms have been completely stripped from them. So there's tension between guards, there's tension between the people in the camp who are radicalized and who are not. Some people are still just saying, keep the peace, eventually we're going to get out of here, let's try and make the best of it, which is kind of like what happened during the Civil Rights Movement too. A lot of, like the Black Panthers, radicalized, we need violence to end segregation, and then people on the other side, like John's parents, who said, don't even get arrested, don't stir up any trouble, it's just going to make matters worse. So a lot of the same things going on here, and kind of in the same general idea. This was in the 40s, so before the height of the civil rights, but a lot of this going on, you know, all over the country to different groups of people. Um, so eventually, and George Takei's father was a person who was kind of elevated in the internment camps. Um, and people would go and see him and try and make their situation better, and George's father did whatever he could to help them. Um, and then the following summer in Japan, the United States decided to use the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, um, and just created so much devastation and killed lots of Japanese civilians and military, and ultimately brought the war to a quicker conclusion. Um, Japan surrendered after they saw the horror of the atomic bomb, but it's tough to realize that it took that to end the war. Um, and there again, I mean, war just creates these terrible situations where I'm sure the United States wasn't happy that we had to bomb a whole city and kill lots of civilians, but ultimately it ended the war early and may have saved lives despite the horrible destruction that the bomb caused. So that ends. The war ends days later, and the government cuts service to the camps and convinces people to move out. The Takei family can't leave because their mom renounced her citizenship. She answered no to some of those loyalty questions that were asked earlier. But luckily, a California lawyer by the name of Wayne Collins represents over 1,000 Japanese Americans who were pressured to renounce their citizenship. And he saves nearly all of them, including George's mom, from deportation. So if you answered no to those loyalty questions, the answer from the United States was, we're going to deport you back to Japan because you can't guarantee your loyalty to us. So this lawyer saves lots and lots of Japanese Americans who don't want to leave the country, but felt kind of tricked by the loyalty test and would ultimately like to stay here and become U.S. citizens. So he was able to do that, and then the family relocated back to Los Angeles after their release from the internment camp after the end of the war. So they get back to Los Angeles. It's been years. Their house, they no longer can rent or own. I forget which they were doing. So they're forced to live in Skid Row, which is a very bad part of Los Angeles with lots of things you wouldn't want to live around going on. But they didn't have money, so they had to essentially work to get back on their feet, save some money, and move to a better place. But while that was going on, it was really difficult. And again, a lot of people living in Los Angeles still didn't trust Japanese Americans after everything that goes on. As a teenager, George becomes curious about the internment camps. After dinner, he talked to his dad a lot about the camps, and though George was very angry that his dad didn't protest internment, his dad insists that he had to keep the family safe, and to show George a good way to protest. He takes him to volunteer for Adlai Stevenson, who ran for president in 1952. And the really cool thing that I took from this is George's dad keeps insisting that America democracy is the best in the world because it's a people's democracy and it can always get better. So even though George's father was taken from their home by soldiers, put on a train, relocated across the country. Their dry cleaning business is gone. He sees his family struggling. He sees all these other Japanese Americans struggling. He still has faith in the United States and its democracy. Essentially being told by the U.S. government that we don't trust you and we're going to lock you up. He still has loyalty and faith in the democracy of America. I think it's a great thing, and I think it speaks to maybe what he saw in Japan before he left too, and how he wanted to make a better situation for his family, and to see that come through really difficult circumstances. So George attends UCLA after he leaves high school. He takes several acting jobs, and finally he is cast as Sulu in Star Trek. And it was a unique role because Japanese Americans weren't always represented in the best light in films or on television. But the director or the person behind Star Trek, when they hired George, they told him that Sulu is going to be a person of very importance, a person of high intelligence, and a very strong character in this Star Trek adventure. And he was. And George did a great job representing that, and I think helping to ease everyone's perception of Japanese Americans. And throughout it, and George is interested, he's reading history books. He wants to learn some about the internment camps and what other people experienced. And he doesn't find a lot of information. So he begins asking questions, forming committees, talking to other people, raising awareness for this thing that happened. Because what we know about history is if you can't remember it, if you don't talk about it, if you don't learn the lessons that happened, it's going to happen again, right? So George didn't want that to happen. He went through this really difficult experience and later realized how difficult it was for his parents and so many other people, and he doesn't want that to repeat. History does repeat itself if we don't learn the lessons. So he wanted to bring this up and expose more people to what went on so that it wouldn't happen again. And let's see. It's the last one here. So President Reagan in 1988 put through some legislation to right a grave wrong. These are using President Reagan's words. More than 40 years ago, shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry living in the United States were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in makeshift internment camps. This action was taken without trial, without jury, and it was solely based on race and for all of these Japanese Americans. And we cannot pay you or make up for the years that you lost, which is why this is so important for this bill. And we want to restore your honor and admit that we did a big wrong and reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law. So through some of George's efforts and many other people's efforts, decades later, there really was, hey, we messed up. This was really bad. We want to own up to that. We want to take responsibility for that and try and make it a little better. But George's father had already passed away at that point, so his father never got to hear those words. So it's really difficult. But George learned a lot from his father and saw a lot of progression in the country throughout his life. He saw the election of Barack Obama, first black president, and but he does want to point out that things can be bad again. He brings up the immigrants coming over in our south border and a lot of those children being separated from their parents, and stuck in camps, and it's we haven't figured out solutions to these problems, and I think in some cases we're doing the best we can, but in a lot of cases we fail even to this day, and he wants us to remember that it's an ongoing thing. But it's a really terrific read. I mean, I knew about these internment camps and that they went on during World War II. I didn't realize how many people and sort of what they faced in the day-to-day. So it's a really great read, and like I said, we have it here at the Burton Public Library. And there's many others that can be put on hold and taken with you. So I very strongly recommend They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. It's a great read. It teaches you a lot about kind of a dark part of World War II that came out that the United States had as policy. And like I said, nowhere near as bad as the horrors of the concentration camps that were perpetrated by Nazi Germany, but still pretty bad in its own right. And I think the underscoring thing is that war creates really terrible situations for everyone, and we wind up making pretty bad decisions during it. And those are forgivable because war is awful, but I hope that we can learn from all of these things that go on. And to just trust people. Judging people based on skin color, hair color, height, religion, basing judgment on a whole group of people is not the way to go. We saw it with March and the March trilogy and segregation, and one of the things that I love most about this country is that as an individual, you can make your way, and hopefully people will take you as an individual and give you the chance to do whatever you want in life. So, graphic novel, They Called Us Enemy, graphic novel trilogy, March by John Lewis, graphic novels, The Hazardous Tales of Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, all of history, and then Gary Paulsen and his Hatchet series, among others, like his memoirs that he just wrote. So Gary Paulsen and the Hatchet series was the only one that was not a graphic novel, and it got me to thinking that he or someone should remake that Hatchet series into graphic novel form. I thought that would be really cool. Now, part of the reason I love the Hatchet series is reading it, and you get all this visual stimulation just based on the words of Gary Paulsen. But I think it'd be pretty cool if he was able to kind of resurrect that really popular series and maybe add a new dimension as to the graphic novel. Just a thought, So yeah, this came out 2 years ago. George Takei, highly recommended. Great amount you can learn about our country's history and World War II and some of the rights of all Americans. All right, this was my last one. Hope you enjoyed them all. And summer readings coming to a close. We've got a couple weeks left, so be sure to come in, collect some prizes, or if you're a teen, fill out what you've read to be entered into that drawing for a $50 gift card to Amazon. And this coming Monday, the 9th, we're going to have the Chardon Polka Band in our reading garden at 2 p.m. Everybody's invited to that. So please come and enjoy some of the music stylings of our favorite polka band here at the Burton Public Library. All right. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I've really enjoyed bringing these graphic novels and book series to you, and happy reading. All right, Mr. Jesse out.